Hello, so welcome to part 2 of this video about false light, and I really recommend that you watch part 1 first because I go into more in depth what the false light actually is. This video is going to be more specifically about egregores or egregoric entities, and they are a huge part of the false light grids and networks, and they tend to be more associated with particular beings. So that could be Jesus or Mother Mary, Mary Magdalene, the typical ascended masters that everybody is kind of familiar with, especially if you've run in any New Age circles at all, then you will have heard of ascended masters. You will have heard of these different beings, whether it's Isis, Horus, Ra, etc., all the Egyptian deities, and also the Greek pantheon. All of these different beings can be associated with that egregoric energy. And an egregore is just a collection of thoughts or a collection of energies, and it's often fueled by people sort of believing something, and then that can create an entity in itself. It's like poltergeists. Most often, most people are not getting haunted by poltergeists, they're getting haunted by egregores that they have created themselves. So most often when people think there's a poltergeist that's doing all this poltergeist activity, is actually just their own energy which is doing it, and they have believed it, and they have fed it, and they have fed it, and they have fed it, and it has actually created an entity on the etheric plane that is made up of their own energy. So that's a really good example of an egregore. Now you also have egregoric entities which are created by different cults and sects and religions, pantheons of belief, so there's many different forms that egregores can take, and there are ones which absolutely can attach and harvest and kind of bleed into your energy field if you give them enough leeway or enough space to come into your field. So often when people come into the sort of New Age and spiritual communities, especially if they're coming from organized religion, sometimes Jesus can be the bridge to the, maybe coming out of organized religion and seeing that, oh, actually Western esoterica, Rudolf Steiner, Helena Blavatsky, all of those big names, all of those people who essentially founded the New Age before it was even the New Age, were already tuning into energies around Christ consciousness and all of that kind of thing. So often you'll get people who come from organized religions who see, oh my gosh, Jesus is still a thing in these other factions of spirituality. And so often Jesus becomes this bridge or this sort of pathway. And especially if you're someone who's come from organized religion, you're used to that hierarchical structure, and you may have already been sort of praying to a Jesus type figure, or, praying to, Almighty God, etc., etc. And potentially, depending on where you're coming from in your relationship with yourself and your relationship with the energies around you, then potentially you may be coming from it from a place of either wounding, trauma, or some form of hierarchy, which very much lends itself to false light energies. So often people will become quite, and this doesn't necessarily this isn't always necessarily people who just come from organized religion, although it can be, but Jesus is very much a symbol within all of our consciousness, because we all are connected with that Christ frequency, no matter what we kind of believe about Jesus. That is like a harmonic and a resonance and a frequency that we all have within us. And so that's why that archetype or that symbol, the sun god, is spoke about in every culture, every country, culture, etc., has some kind of story about a sun god, about virgin birth, about immaculate conception in some way. And so it exists within us. That story, that archetype exists within us. So it's often a really, Jesus is a gateway into so much kind of understanding, stories, meaning around spirituality. And so he is like a sort of familiar figure that people cling to, which is often why they will plug into false light grids of Jesus and Mary, and that sort of Holy Trinity energy is I would say probably one of the most common types of false light that people do plug into, is that sort of false light Jesus stuff. Another really common one as well is the Egyptian pantheon. Again, Egypt is so reflective of our almost the sort of highest points of what human consciousness has been and will be again. It's almost like a future and a past symbol. And so many of us have memories of, whether conscious or unconscious, of having been in amongst that Atlantean or Egyptian kind of frequency and energy, and represents something very, very deep and very, very sacred within us. So often when we're looking to reclaim our spirituality, maybe we were always interested in hieroglyphics when we were young, or so many people have fascination with Egypt, and so there's a familiarity there again, and so people will often gravitate towards that, plug into the various false light grids around that. And yeah, I would say that's a really, really common one, is people start receiving information, secret information, and all that kind of stuff, which is heavily hijacked and, is often sort of coming from that place of, you're above others, you're here to do a certain thing, or, you're the only one receiving this information on the earth right now, that kind of stuff. You're an Isis priestess, and many people were. There were cults of Isis. There were, it wasn't like totally uncommon, so not saying that if you've received that is necessarily wrong, not saying that at all, but it's just, it can be used, that type of information can be false and can be used as a mechanism for control and for separation and for diverting people off their path. That's what all of this stuff is about, because the more sovereign we become, the less controllable we are, the less of it's almost like the more of a threat we become to the overarching energetic systems and structures. And I'm not just talking about the systems and structures we see external to us, but the ones which rule us on the inside and the ones which rule us on the etheric planes. And so, there are so many different groups invested in us maintaining a certain level of consciousness, and that is why we are constantly being bombarded with information to confuse us, to numb us, to not make us aware of who we really are, of our the highest sort of attainment that we can have in this life in terms of our mission and our blueprint and our purpose. And so all of the false light is about diverting people from that, and about harvesting energy and maintaining that level of control. So just being wary if a being comes to you and they're like, "Hi, I'm Isis," or "Hi, I'm Mary Magdalene." And sometimes, I'm sure there are many of us who have had real, genuine, incredible journeys, astral experiences, etheric experiences, channelings, all of that kind of amazing stuff with beings that are genuine, of course. But there's also a vast amount of this stuff which is false light. So I never share anything like this out of fear or anything like that. It's such important and valuable information that is so necessary for us on our path and on our path of evolution. So just always being wary, if a being is not being respectful of your boundaries, is trying to push things, has a kind of weird buzzy kind of energy, then that's just such a good indication that something isn't right. And all you have to do is say, no, step out of my field. And if it's a genuine interaction, it will happen when the time is right. No, you're never missing out. I think that's something that can happen, is we feel like, oh no, but if I turn them away, what if I've done something wrong, or what if they're offended, or what if I lose this experience? No, any being that is genuinely operating from that higher level frequency will totally respect you and respect your decision, will respect your sovereignty, and will be more than happy and willing to step away and come back at a later date when you are feeling more solid in your field. So never be afraid that there's something you're missing out on. Yeah, they will always come back if it's right, if they're actually of the highest, and not I don't even like that, of the highest, like, but of a place where they're genuinely working for the exchange of information, and not of the blocking of information, and not of the desire for power and control. So yeah, feel free to leave me a comment, or feel free to share any of your experiences, and thank you so much for watching.